Steinmeier?
Here.
Mayor Ware?
Here. Adam Norris, I will turn it over to you to introduce our consultants and proceed with the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you. Yes, as this group may recall, we back in January, we outlined a series of priorities that were important for IPL going forward. There are 7 of them. This was item number 3 in that list of priorities, which was to engage a management services consultant to kind of outline some opportunities for us, to areas of weakness and opportunities for improvement, and help us map out a path going forward. So we engaged DKMT for that work, and this represents the conclusion of the phase 1 portion of this work. So they're going to present their findings and recommendations, and then ultimately we would like to move on to phase 2, which will implement a lot of the recommendations they'll outline here. So without any questions, I'll hand it over to Don and Heather.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, Councilman, Madam Mayor, for taking the time for the presentation. First of all, who are we? I know some of you met us through the interview process, but just to refresh your memory, we're a team that has worked together previously, primarily at a major consulting firm called Navigant Consulting, where we worked on various engagements together prior to going off on either forming our own companies or working together with other in other capacities. Heather most recently was with the city of Boulder, Colorado, helping them with their municipalization or reverse municipalization of taking investor-owned utility and making it a municipality. So that's just one example of the diverse experience our team has. My background is similar to Jim's, and I was nuclear Navy. I worked with Westinghouse. I worked with Commonwealth Edison prior to going in the consulting business. In the consulting business with Navigant, I worked with numerous IOUs, municipalities, federal government organizations in the area of organizational improvement. Heather, do you want to say a few words? You're on mute.
I apologize for that. We have, as Don said, we have a very diverse team. We have folks on our team that have a very strong financial background. Dan Stathis and I actually come from accounting and finance areas, and I ran the financial areas of a very large utility in Austin for many years. And so we have the engineering, the Ferc, the NERC, operations. I also ran transmission operations and established one for one of the utilities I work for. So I think we've got a pretty broad perspective. But I also want to add that we really enjoyed working with your team. The folks there are very dedicated. You've got some good folks that really want to do a good job. And so we do appreciate the help and contributions we got from them.
Yeah, I would second that. We know that consultants can be very intrusive to some organizations and get in the way of normal course of doing business. And everyone was very open, honest, and forthcoming with information and helping us with this phase 1 engagement. So in the interest of time, I know you want to do a lot. We probably want to spend most of our time with Q&A. Just to go over our approach, we use a structured interview process. We create questionnaires tailored to the engagement. As those of you who participate in the interview process know, we ask a range of questions to identify gaps against the standard operating model that we use, and we look at various common areas of utility operations. So the standard interview process gives us an idea of where you are, based on our previous experience working with other organizations and municipalities, we identify gaps, challenges, and opportunities for the organization. And then one of the two important things are we assess the capability of the organization that maintain and implement improvements, and also are the recommendations aligned with the key stakeholders. In this case, it's city administration, the PUAB, the council, IPL employees, and the citizens of the City of Independence. So we were asked early on that what would be the outcome of this engagement as part of the proposal process. We were specifically asked this question, that the engagement could last anywhere from 6 months to 24 months. At the end of that time, what would success look like? Based on the aspirations that Adam and Jim articulated to us for IPL that they'd like to see, we think that, at the end of this engagement, the goal should be a clear and concise 5-year strategy that aligns with the needs of the city. You either have closed the gaps or are in the process of closing gaps that have been identified through this engagement. You have a knowledge of your technology opportunities and challenges, and what it can do for you in running IPL, and broadening the role of IPL perhaps in the city, so for example through broadband, engaging the staff, communicating with the staff, giving them, we found through the interview process that everybody's on board to meeting the challenges and addressing any shortfalls that IPL may have. They just are looking for direction, vision, and communication, and a framework to achieve those goals. A detailed communication plan to support the city's work with the public, and then IPL seen as trustworthy, transparent, and progressive by its customers and its stakeholders, including city administration, council members, and the PUAB. So that's what we would articulate as the eventual outcome of this engagement. So these are the areas we look at in our phase 1 high-level review, identify challenges and opportunities in each of these areas. We use this scoring system, and red is, we think there's a relatively large gap. We think that it is, there is some time element to closing this gap to help the organization. And we think this should be managed outside normal reporting processes and normal management processes. These are high priority items. Yellow items are those that are moderate risk to the organization. We think that those can be managed within the normal management processes of the organization. They just should be flagged as priorities that should be tracked in detail. And green is also similar, at a lower priority, tracked within the normal operating practices of the organization. So the results of our review were 3 areas that were red and relatively urgent: administration, asset management, and business operations. As these gaps are closed, obviously the priority of risk changes to medium risk and eventually goes away to low normal operating risk. We thought that in general, the environmental area seemed to have the fewest issues at this point in time through our high level review. We reviewed, I would say, more than 20 people, and probably have reviewed more than 200 sets of documents to come up with these ratings. So we've got a fair, and based on our experience, we're confident these are an actual reflection of some of the challenges and opportunities IPL faces. So in the interest of time, we'll focus on the red areas, but we look forward to entertaining questions about recommendations made throughout the report. So administrative wise, basically we boiled the opportunities down into, we think we are well aware that the City of Independence has a strategic plan articulating a vision for 2040. the IPL does not appear to be have its own plan or being a part of that plan in a unified manner that articulates near-term and long-term goals for the organization. Those could be economic development of the city. How does IPL have a role in that? What is your long-term generation strategy for replacing generation? Would you consider partnering with other municipalities in the future to build new generation, contract for generation, retool existing generation? What is your long-term strategy regarding rates? Where do you want to compare with other utilities? Traditional goals that come out of a strategic plan we've seen traditionally are, safety goals, reliability goals, capital expenditure goals, those type of issues. Heather, you mentioned that there are some other areas that are more progressive utilities are using for goals. You want to talk about those?
Sure. As you look at strategic plans, as Don mentioned, the traditional ones are reliability, customer service, safety, generation, that sort of thing. But with the changing world, what I've been seeing is utilities are having to think about their business a little bit different in order to adapt. So things that, such as technology, having a technology strategic plan and what they need to be able to move to, or on rates, for example. One of the things I noticed in the City of Independence strategic plan is the focus on growth and economic development. Well, what I'm seeing is the utility is a great asset to the city. And what a lot of cities do is they use their utility as an economic development tool, either through rate design, through contributions to infrastructure. Many companies are looking at, for example, whether a city has rebates or grants for implementing energy efficiency measures, for retrofitting buildings, for putting solar on rooftops, so that they can add to their own goals of having an environmentally sensitive company. A lot of employees are attracted to companies that have an environmental goal, and so the utility can help with that. Other things are culture. The culture of the utility, as we know, the utility industry is transforming, and it has a very traditional culture, but a lot of them are having to move to a more progressive, younger based culture, as so much of the population has different needs and don't necessarily come into the office to pay their bill or to do hookups, how you do your business remotely. So there are a lot of different factors to add to this that I think play very nicely into the overall city strategy, financial sustainability, different ways in which you look at that now, customer satisfaction, different metrics around that. All of those would tie in very nicely to what you're already thinking. So those are just some of the thoughts we had around strategic planning.
And what I would just like to emphasize when we talk about strategic plan, this is your strategic plan. Our team would support your team in developing the plan. So we would do the groundbreaking research. We would become subject matter experts in areas that you have interest, and we would support and provide a structure and framework for developing the strategic plan. But I can't emphasize more that it's your plan. It's not a strategic plan dropped off by your consultant, because those usually go nowhere. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. Another area in administration, we know that you've got a lot of long tenured employees, and there's a lot of knowledge about operating the utility in the past. And this embedded knowledge doesn't necessarily require formal policies and procedures, but it becomes an issue when you get turnover in the workforce and you're looking for standardization of the way to do things, that you develop some formal policies and procedures around decision makings and the way you do business, so that you can pass on institutional knowledge to the workers that are coming into the organization in a systematic manner. And it also provides a framework on which to hang a continuous improvement program. The policies and procedures will lead to metrics that measure your performance, and from that you can develop continuous improvement. And lastly, administrative wise, to us it doesn't appear at this juncture, we know there's been a lot of organizational turmoil, but IPL is not a data driven organization. And I think that part of the frustration has been felt in the PUAB and in the council, looking for data, looking for information on what's going on in certain areas, maybe getting conflicting information. And part of this probably stems from a culture that is getting by on embedded institutional knowledge. People know how to operate the utility. There's been no need to write things down. There's been no need to record data. And eventually it starts to catch up with you. So our recommendations are, one is the integrated strategic plan, develop that. We think that a major area of focus needs to be Ferc accounting and accurate reliability reporting. We'll talk more about Ferc accounting in detail, but IPL, as you're well aware, you have obligations to SPP to maintain financial reserves, to maintain adequate financial records, things along of that nature. And without Ferc accounting and the proper coding of accounts, that leads to problems and cost disallowances down the line. It also leads to you speaking a different language than all the other utilities out there when you try and compare performance. Also, accurate reliability reporting. The fundamentals measurements like SAIDI, KD, KFI, those type of things are pretty standard benchmarks throughout the industry. And as we'll talk later on, everyone we interviewed was happy with the performance of the City of Independence. But when we looked for independent statistical information or data-driven information, we found it's not straightforward to figure out exactly what the reliability is in the City of Independence. There's a need for standard operating procedures that we talked about to transfer institutional knowledge, a robust communication plan with all your stakeholders, including the public. And we think that your HR support at this point in time is spread pretty thin. As you look at reorganizing IPL and dividing responsibilities between the city and the staff, perhaps like in the financial reporting area, you may need some more, some HR support. Not permanent, maybe temporary help, but there is a need for that skill set there. As far as asset management, this goes hand in hand with reliability, financial planning, and reporting, where a formal asset management plan that links to your maintenance programs, links to your capital management strategies and your strategic plan prevents surprises and improves the overall reliability of the system in the most cost-effective manner. Helps you plan for spare part inventories and things of that nature that go directly towards shortening outages. So our recommendation in that area is, right now you're putting your assets in CityWorks. We recommend that they be tied not only to their condition and age, but also perhaps to some of the goals that you come up with in the strategic plan, be it safety, regulatory compliance, reliability, what have you. It would be good to tie them to those, conduct a risk analysis, prioritize those assets that would affect your performance measures the most, implement a condition monitoring program, and then link the overall asset management program to your capital improvement budget. And lastly, the last red area here deals with business operations. Overall financial reporting, transparency, communication with regard to how the budget is built, the the easy way, and this is, it's not unusual, but the easy way to do budgets is what was last year's budgets? Let's change it by the X% and move on. And you can, many organizations fall into that trap. And it was communicated to us that, for example, that's how some of your overtime numbers may be set. But you've got to consider that IPL is a 24/7 organization. You can anticipate that there'll be a certain number of outages each year out of normal working hours, and per your labor agreements, that's going to drive your overtime rates. And structural overtime can't be managed away. It's something that you have to plan for, budget for, and live with, and perhaps negotiate down the future. But it's not something that you can have a manager say, "Well, get rid of the overtime," when somebody's fighting an outage at 2 a.m. You need to review. It would be helpful, I think, just from a culture and climate perspective, if reviewing the methodology for shared service was more transparent. It would help you in communication between the city and IPL, knowing that charges are fair. On our initial review with Dan and Heather, didn't find anything to be extravagant, but it would also help you defending your shared service expenses before FERC, and not getting disallowances for those types of services. And then an organization the size and complexity of IPL, you are one of the top 100 municipal utilities in the country in terms of revenues, and you're also one of the top 100 municipalities in the country in terms of number of customers. Based on our experience, we think there's enough work in financial reporting and accounting to support 1.5 to 2 full-time dedicated FTEs to IPL. We know you're working in mapping accounts right now. You've done some staffing changes to address things, and you have self-recognized the need for some additional support there. But that, based on our experience, that's what we've seen. And then lastly, power purchase agreements. They are monitored for daily operations by system ops, but it seems that the institutional knowledge that supports those and sustains them over time is an area that needs to be planned with regard to succession planning and knowledge transfer, to make sure you don't have any shortfalls or inadvertently violate your contract or let things lapse. So the final recommendations there are regarding mapping the FERC accounts, documenting allocation processes, formally delineate the responsibilities between the city and IPL, not only with who's responsible for what, but who is responsible to report that. What reports should the council, what reports should city administration, what reports should the PUAB expect on a monthly, semi-monthly, annual basis that they're not getting now, that they agree that that's the information they want, so that those can be created in a transparent manner and meet the needs of the stakeholders. Lastly, we know that there's some transparency issues around the capital improvement program. It currently, we haven't sorted out all the details, but it currently appears that projects are approved. If they're delayed or canceled, it's not really clear how that money is treated. In our report, we list some of the capital improvement projects going back, I think, to 2008 that still say there's available budget, but there's no ready explanation for how that money is accounted for if it's still in your rate base. Redesign, the financial reports to make them more useful, not only to the stakeholders, but also to IPL management. Currently, IPL managers have a hard time figuring out where they sit with regard to their annual goals and their annual obligations. So it's frustrating for the managers in IPL if they don't have the right information to run their organization. It looks to the council and the PUAB that IPL is withholding information, when really the greatest concern is that they internally don't even have that information. increase the skills and competencies of all the staff for monitoring the PPAs, and then tie the budgeting process to your existing work rules in the labor agreements, actually reflecting the way you conduct business. So those are the three areas in red, and in the interest of time, that's what we're going to focus on in this presentation. But to address those three areas for phase two, what we would propose to do is support IPL and the city in developing the strategic plan. We think that part of this can be done remotely. Part of it would be done in person, especially to facilitate larger meetings, depending on COVID and your rules around larger gatherings. We would have to see how soon this can be implemented. All the others can be done remotely. We can help map Ferc accounts and improve your financial reports. We think that it's important to get to the root cause of what is causing errors in reliability reporting to the American Public Power Association. Also internally, there's confusion among staff members of what the reliability numbers are. And lastly, we can help implement a formal asset management program at this point in time and tie that to the financial reporting efforts and the reliability improvement efforts. So these last slides are just how we are set up as an organization. I think you've seen this in our previous presentations, and vignettes on our staff members. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Adam, and for Q&A.
Hi, Don, could you just go back to that previous slide for 1 second? I just wanted to, I'm sorry, one more. Yeah, I just wanted to take another second to look at that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Adam, did you or Jim have anything that you wanted to add before we get into our committee discussion?
I don't have anything to add unless Jim does. I defer the time to you all to ask your questions unless Jim has something.
No, same here. I'll let you talk to the experts.
Okay, thank you. I know the offer was made to present this also to the PUAB. My understanding is that they preferred just to have this presentation. I presume some or all of them are watching it live or will watch it at some point in time. So I appreciate their participation and listening to this report as well. We can do this a couple different ways. We can just each have a few minutes to give reactions, ask some questions, or we can kind of go through this category by category. I kind of feel like maybe unless there's a preference from either of the council members, maybe we can each just start off by giving our responses and maybe asking some questions. And then if there's more follow-up, we'll do it that way. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. Then I'll start with the true expert in the room, my cuff, has a much better understanding of this utility from his perspective in some regards. So, Mike, why don't you kick things off for us?
All right. I read this report about 3 times now, trying to figure out. I've seen plenty of these in 35 years, and it's like the normal ones I've seen as far as employees airing out their views, which is fine. I guess that's the way you change things. But I did have a few questions as I went through here. We talked a little bit about new generation, and I didn't see a whole lot other than the CTs, which we already know about out there. The rates, I seen where you was talking about just a flat rate rather than the rate schedule that we have. I don't know. I'm just going to throw these out there and you can respond to whichever ones. I'm sure there'll be more talk about it. The Ferc end of it, is there even a qualified Ferc accountant at Power and Light? I haven't seen one in years. I'm not sure that there's even one there. And then I've seen a lot about no SOP, standing operating procedures, and there was all kinds of written ones back in 2017 and 18. In fact, we had an updated one on the storm, I think in 2017, done by Jeff Barnett. It told all about storm restoration. I see in here it's saying there's not one, or I don't know where all this stuff just went down, went to. There's just tons of stuff in here. Of course, another thing I read in here was the rush to Power and Light because of wages. It kind of concerned me there. Of course, you consultants are not entitled to this, or probably didn't know about. There is a resolution out there that separates all the enterprises from the rest of the city. And that includes wages and everything else. So there is a resolution that's been there, I think, probably 10 or 12 years that identifies that them folks out there are not connected to the general fund. So that's why the union has a little different thing out there. Let's see. Thanks here. This thing's like a book here. I've talked about this money on the budget that when the projects don't get done or don't even get started. There's been money in there. I'm glad you found that. And I know there was a couple substations that money was appropriated every year and never did buy the property. Another thing on here, this is one that I caught. When we're talking about the Southwest Power Pool and our transmission allocations that were given from KCP&L, I was kind of interested that we settled for $5 million, but we requested 7.5, and we didn't have the appropriate supporting documents to do that. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more about how that happened. Got a couple more things. As far as the power purchase agreement, we used to have a person down there, so the power dispatcher wasn't messing with all that stuff. And he was a forecaster for daily usage, weekly, monthly, annually. In fact, he left there. Now he's out here selling them forecast programs. And I guess we don't do that anymore, that we're just using power dispatchers. Other than that, the environmental end of it, you said we was very, very well off on the environmental. We did away with the power plant. We did away with the ponds out there. We did away with Missouri City. So there's not really a lot of environmental things out there. And that department has grown to 3 or 4 people now. So that doesn't surprise me that it's in green on that. I don't know. It's just, like I said, I know a lot of written SOPs down there. I don't know what has happened to them. I don't know why people are not providing them for you, because I know for a fact they were there. Other than that, I'll go ahead. If you guys want to comment on any of them things or get back later, I don't want to stretch this meeting out till midnight. So just some of the things I've seen through here as I've reviewed it.
So Don or Heather, do you want to?
Sure. On the SOPs specifically, those are related to the CTs. We did not find any SOPs, emergency operating procedures for the CTs through the interview process. I can't speak to former operations at Blue Valley or anything like that. I imagine you had perhaps more robust administrative control of that. But now that you just have the CTs, we weren't told of any. None were shown to us that we could review. So that's where that comment came from. There are operating instructions, but we felt that there could be more detail and more usefulness put into make it an industry standard operating procedure. The restoration plan, we do recognize that you do have a restoration plan. We recommended some improvements to it. For example, you don't do tabletop exercises. To our knowledge, you don't do tabletop exercises to test the plan. So if a storm came through, you don't simulate how you would do the response or what the chain of command would be for that. That's a pretty standard industry practice to exercise those plans. With regard to future generation, no, you're correct, sir, that we did not recommend any future generation alternatives at this point in time. We think that, you do have a recent energy master plan from Burns and McDonald, but that's also probably a topic for robust discussion in the strategic plan development. What are your goals for long-term vision for additional generation to meet your future needs? Do you want to go it alone? Do you want to try and find a municipal partner? What type of technology would you use and things like that?
Yep. Something on my what I was going to ask you. AMI, I thought that was a very interesting comment in there too about that our system really doesn't hook up to that, and we're better off training the employees that we have and using them in a different fashion rather than looking at AMI. And that's always been my thing, is that we're looking at $58 million to switch over to AMI when we don't even have generation here, where that would be half a power plant if that was, it would be in something like that.
The AMI comment was made in the context of customer service, in that it was communicated to us. We believe the root cause for some of the customer service issues is late, incorrect, or estimated billing. And it may be related to the overall productivity or throughput of the meter reading team. So and because of frustration with rates, you've gone to a two-tiered rate structure for the next 3 years. When you implement an ANI system, experience has been that increases customer service issues, just the transition alone. The thought is that you have enough on your plate right now with 2 rate structures in place already, that overlaying AMI on top of that might just add another complication that you probably don't need at this period of time. The comment for flat rate billing is that you're fairly unique in that you've got a lot of light commercial, a lot of residential load. There's not a lot of variability to your load outside standard models of fuel adjustment charges, temperature, seasons, and things like that. So with advances in utility analytics, some people call it subscription power, similar to your phone or your Netflix account. You just get a flat monthly bill, and it's up to the energy provider to figure out that they're made whole and that they properly manage the system. That would address your labor productivity issue, might simplify your billing, but it's something that should be done after some great thought and analysis. And lastly, the comment there with regard to pairing it with your broadband system. Experience is typically one of the most expensive parts of an AMI system is the backbone communication, the last mile to the house. If you're thinking of municipal broadband, it may behoove you to think of them as one project with features where you put in municipal broadband, you find a vendor who can then piggyback AMI on top of that, if that's the direction you want to go. And you might have a more robust system for less capital cost. So
Yeah,
that's why.
I don't know where the broadband thing comes from Fire and Light. I didn't know Fire and Light was really involved in it until recently. I know years ago we put some fiber in a electrical pipe, service pipe, to see if it had any effect on the, on the reception or whatever. I'm not a broadband person or broadband, but I know we did test that, and then all of a sudden this thing's grown into an animal that I really am not very familiar with. But anyway, well, other than that, I think that's it for now. Let someone else go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure we'll have some more comments and questions. Councilman Steinmeier.
Hello, how's everyone?
Just great. How about you? Welcome to the Utility Rates Committee.
It's
And your first homework assignment.
Yeah, nothing like giving the big one, right? I have to unlock my eyes sometimes from being so cross-eyed reading through all the material and the information. One of the things that I was curious about when you were doing your comparison as top 100 municipal utility, I'm wondering how does IPL compare rate per kilowatt hour with other top 100 municipal utilities?
I cannot give you a rate comparison off the top of my head. I can tell you that your operating revenue per customer is lower than many of your peer utilities. You're about a rough analysis. We did a rough analysis and you're about third quartile there.
Okay, I would be curious to know how we would compare, if that's something that we could find out. Is that something that you all can help us with?
Yeah, and I'll jump in. Part of, if you'll recall the discussion around Ferc, and that's Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the uniform system of accounts that all utilities use. If IPL use those accounts on a regular basis, I mean, once a year, IPL does a CAFR, and they have to put them in those accounts, but it is a manipulative process. If IPL could do that on a regular basis as part of their coding, we would have transparent, consistent data that we could then do those sorts of benchmarks with other like utilities. The problem that we ran into is some of those comparisons don't necessarily work because of the way the data is classified and are somewhat inconsistent. So yes, we can do that once we get the data classified on a regular basis. Then IPL can do it on a regular basis.
That would be helpful. I'd appreciate that if we could do that. And I'm grateful, Don, for your service. I thank you. You know, Jim, appreciate your service. I'm a Navy guy too, so you know, there's a whole lot of salt right here. I'm wondering, were you provided with our city charter? I mean, have you read the city charter specific to our public works, the public utilities?
I can answer that, yes.
Okay. And in terms of how, you know, what you're laying out and designing it, how do you see it fitting in with our city charter? I mean, is it going to match with what is required for us to have? Yeah,
yes. I mean, there's one of the things that we talk about is strategic planning. And what we found is that from a governance perspective, people have different views of what that charter says, and it's not the same view. And so I think part of strategic planning would help bring the parties together to get a consistent understanding of what that charter says. And anything that we've talked about would definitely, you could make it, it would fit within those requirements from what I can tell.
So well, that raises another question then. If people have different interpretations of the charter, whose are you going to follow?
Well, I think the best way to resolve that is to have the parties come together and figure out what folks do agree on and what they do want from the utility, and then identify what the differences are and why. And are they reconcilable differences or not?
Yeah, I'd like to have a party on that. And hear all the different opinions, because I read it, it's pretty straightforward and pretty clear. But I'll leave it to you to maybe if you can compile the different perspectives. I'd like to see or hear those too.
Sure. Sir, I think that's one of the outputs of the strategic planning process that we said, it gets everybody on the same page. But as Heather mentioned, we look at IPL as from a city perspective, undervalued, underutilized assets. And if the goal of the city, if it is unanimous consent, is all we want is power and we want the cheapest rate we can get, you don't need a municipal utility to do that. You could go to a model where, you sell it to somebody else and agreed upon rate structure, and you're out of the utility business. You can go to a model like LIPA, where you own the assets and you hire a third party to run it for you. But, if you want to take advantages of the unique capabilities of a municipal utility, then you look to say, how can it enhance the community, not only from an economic development perspective in creating jobs, and you control the rate structure, but also, let's say you want to bring a data center to the city of Independence. You love their load factor. You love the water use. You love the jobs, etc. Well, of all the various utility ownership models, the one where you control the rate, control the terms, that you can go to the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world, probably the best platform to do that is the municipal utility. So if there is an interpretation that your city charter prevents you from doing that, then you should probably look at what is the ownership structure we need. But if you think that your city charter allows you to help the city of Independence grow, then your strategic focus may be on what should our goal be and how should we use the utility.
Yeah, and I think I've heard all those. I think one of the greatest assets our city has right now is our utilities, but we're underutilizing them. And to build our economic engine, we're going to have to be a little more innovative, maybe take some risk, and do it right. I'm open to, hearing plans or different plans to maximize what we have. I don't think and this is just me, I'll be my own consultant to give my own opinion here, but I don't think that we can afford to give up more in our utility. We need to look at how we structure and we put this utility back online to be a revenue engine for our city. We desperately need the jobs and the revenue if we're going to be progressive and move forward. And that's just my opinion on it. So the broadband piece, I'm glad to hear that's kind of an AMI thing. I've lived in a major city that had smart meters, and they were an absolute nightmare. And they were sold as the goose that lays a golden egg. It cost more. They were not efficient. Utility companies they had tremendous overreach in the homes, and I think they would be an absolute disaster in our city. And we've got bigger issues than trying to put together something for AMI. So that's just my opinion. I hope I'm going to read through more of your report, and I'll look forward to having more discussions. Boy, I left you all silent. I didn't mean to do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That was some really good input. So I guess it's my turn. I have a couple questions just regarding methodology in conducting your report. I know you conducted interviews with council members, PUAB members, staff. Can you give me an idea of the participation from each of those groups into this report? And when were those done? I'm trying to recall.
The interviews?
Yeah, the interviews.
We did all the interviews over a 3-week period.
June.
Yeah, end of June, beginning of July.
No, it was the end of, wasn't it the end, it was about the first or second week of June, and we wrapped up in June.
Well,
So
our final report is July 10th. So we conducted the both of it, the interviews in June and the first week in July.
Okay, and you've had adequate participation from all of those, the council, the PUAB, and obviously the staff and management and employees.
Everyone we requested to talk to, we talked to.
Great. Okay. What about community? What about the community? Did you interview anybody in the community that wasn't a elected, appointed, or hired by the city?
No.
Okay. Thanks. I think I'm going to start, Don and Heather, with kind of responding to some of the things you gave us today in your presentation, and then I'm going to go back to the report. You mentioned that, and I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, because you had mentioned in your presentation that the plan was through, the city's plan goes through 2040. So that's a comprehensive development plan that stretches to 2040. The strategic plan, which is different, goes through 2021. Correct. So when you referenced that, were you talking, and you had said that IPL wasn't specifically called out in that plan. So were you referring to the comprehensive development plan or the city's strategic plan?
And I'll answer that because I looked at both of those. Okay. When I look at, well, actually, I didn't see them really called out particularly with some specific strategies. The comprehensive plan dealt with the longer look of where you want to go with the city. But I really kind of tried to focus on the shorter term, the one that is through 2021. Okay. And so I didn't see it called out there.
So there's just the only thing that specifically, I mean, there's sort of things related to utilities in the 5-year strategic plan, but we're getting ready to engage in that process again in a couple of weeks to plan for the next 5 years. And I do think that things more specifically related to the utilities are going to be a part of that next 5-year strategic planning process. It was really, develop a utilities master plan, which we've done. I mean, that was something that was completed. And there's just a lot about growth and economic development and financial sustainability that, is sort of tangent to the utilities, but maybe isn't specifically called out. So I just wanted to be clear with that. I think when we're talking about the comprehensive development plan, we're talking about development ready sites, creating shovel ready places that has the appropriate zoning and the utilities already in place. So I just want to kind of not mix those two up too much. So I just wanted to be clear what you were referencing, but you clearly looked at both of those.
Sure. And just to build on what you already said, yeah, the financial sustainability, the economic growth, the I think there's like 4 key areas of the strategic, the 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. And while the utility got called out, you can do a separate utility strategic plan that ties directly into those because they are relevant definitely to the utility.
Right. Okay. So I'm a big fan of strategic planning. I had to be talked into it when we did it for the city in general, but I'm a convert. I think it has provided us with great focus. And so I am appreciative of that recommendation. I mean, the total cost, I'm just going to call it $250,000 if we were to implement all of your recommendations, plus a little contingency. So, you know, that's just something that the council is going to have to take under consideration is, do we need to outsource? I mean, is that the right mix? You know, is that the right price? Is that something we have to entirely outsource? Is some of that stuff that we could do internally? But generally, I think that going through that process for the city and having a document that's got a checklist on it of these are the things that we're going to tackle has served the city and the citizens extremely well to keep us focused. And we've gotten further faster by doing it that way. So I would just, you know, make that remark. Going
Can
back.
I ask a question, Mayor?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a quick question. Something you brought up, and I am a huge fan of, is the involvement of people outside of the city and the elected offices. And that is a piece that can drive your strategic plan. It may add cost, but it may also add value. And those are things, again, we want the city to manage this and lead it. And we just provide the support process. But that's something I would encourage you all to consider in this process.
So that's on my list. So I'll just jump right to that. There was, I mean, there's on page 9 of your report, I just referenced the page numbers in case anybody wants to follow along. Yeah, you recommend that the City Council and the PUAB should provide opportunities for community participation. The way we've done our strategic planning and the process that we are about to engage in, is there is a period of the council coming together, which we're doing in a few weeks, and just kind of whiteboarding, you know, what do we want to do? What are the priorities? What are we hearing? What's next? What can we tackle? I mean, just kind of dumping it all out there. And then there's a period, a long period of public engagement where we reach out to some key strategic partners like our Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber, I mean, so on and so forth, the people that would normally come to mind, our boards and commissions for input. We do some, you know, town hall meeting type surveying, you know, that type of thing. And that is, I'm looking over here because my calendar is here. And that's, you know, a period of several months that we do the citizen engagement and outreach part. I mean, we did the same thing when we did the comprehensive development plan. There's a long period of citizen engagement. And then we come back after that and, you know, write it down on a piece of paper and, you know, and the council, you know, then adopts it. So that's, you know, what the process would be like. I'm certainly a fan of having that community participation in that type of organized structure. I wasn't clear from your report if you were recommending just, I mean, there's opportunity for community participation under our current structure. The POAB by charter has the ability to conduct public hearings. The city council, of course, has the ability at any time to conduct public hearings on any topic that we wish. There's sometimes requirements for public hearings, but if there's not a requirement, we still have the opportunity to do that. I'm a little concerned. The council, you know, is going to have to determine what level of community participation we want to have on particular issues. I mean, there's calls, you know, or requests all the time from citizens who want to vote on things. I mean, they want them to be put on a ballot. And, you know, we went through that with AMI. There was an initiative petition to put that on the ballot. The council, you know, I think wisely decided we would just accept the petition and not put things on the ballot. I mean, now Jackson County is talking about, you know, there's putting whether or not to take down the Andrew Jackson statue on the ballot. I mean, you know, there comes a line where we are a representative democracy, and, you know, the elected officials are elected to make those decisions with the input of our professional staff, our volunteer boards and commissions who are appointed, and certainly our individual outreach to to citizens. So I think, you know, that caused me a little bit of pause of saying, you know, how much on a day-to-day operational basis are we going to reach out for community participation? So I just would like maybe some clarity on what you sort of intended by that.
Sure. And that's fair. It's right now it's very tough being in government leadership. After my 6 years in Boulder, you know, folks want to have a say-so in what's going on, and, you know, whether it's a vote or in a public forum or whatever. So, and that's what it's all about. I liked what you said about the fact the city's embarking on its next phase of strategic planning, and the process that you go through, that you go to targeted groups like your chamber or even neighborhood associations or whatever. You know, I've got a couple of thoughts there. One is that specific folks that represent those groups can be brought in into a forum to provide input into the plan as far as priorities for those different segments, or you can piggyback input from those groups in your citywide strategic plan. So you could have a section of the survey or process that says, okay, here's the big picture now, and looking at our utility, do you have any comments or desires or goals or what we should be, you know, expecting from the utility, whether it's a certain type of generation, or we want better reliability, or we want to cap our rate increases to a certain percentage a year, or we want these types of services. So you could do it in two different segments, two different ways. One, just piggyback some of those questions on your strategic planning process, or select key individuals that would represent those segments and have them participate in a process. And it can be as big or as small as you like, but I tend to like smaller group meetings where you interview people and get their input and then bring them together to narrow down the priorities. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Adam, I'm going to ask you a question. We did our citizen survey in 2018. We typically do that every other year. You know, that's not free to do. Are we planning on doing the citizen survey in 2020, or is that still up for discussion?
I mean, it's always up for discussion, of course, but
Is it budgeted?
I don't believe it's budgeted this year.
It's not budgeted. Okay, that was my question, because we've done, I mean, it's typically every other year. I know not too many years ago, we skipped a year. So, but, you know, I just want to point out in our last survey, our satisfaction with our utilities rates very, very high. I mean, I think we can sort of suss out people who are dissatisfied with the rate, the delivery, the you know, the management is our responsibility, but the average citizen, you know, obviously doesn't, you know, necessarily know about that or care about it as long as their lights come on and their bill is reasonable and they can pay it. So, you know, I don't ever want to lose sight of that. We get into a lot of these discussions of how things can be improved, and they have to be. I mean, there's no question about that. But from the public standpoint, our utilities rate very high on reliability, service, and value. So, you know, when we're talking about more community engagement at such time where it becomes feasible to do a citizen survey, you know, we'll consistently track that, but historically that's been the case, is there's a high level of satisfaction with all of our utility operations. And I don't know if you looked at those survey results as part of your study. You did? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I did. And you're right, reliability and speed of restoration of outages is very highly rated. The one thing I did notice, there was, you know, the satisfaction with the value of electricity was kind of split. But one of the things that just caught my attention was the declining level of satisfaction over the last 3 surveys. While it's still great in many areas, it is less than it was 2 years before that, and then 4 years before that. So as you said, that's something that everyone needs to be mindful of. And I don't know what's driving that, but it seemed to be a trend I noticed in all the areas. The other thing that came up was that of the top 2 priorities, that the community said that IPL, an investment in IPL, is one of the top 2 priorities on their list.
Right. And industrial development.
Right.
I mean, that's been consistent over the last several surveys as well, is that the citizens feel like we're moving much too slowly on industrial development. Anyway, I'm going to try to keep moving. In the report on page 9, you state that there's a growing reliance by the council and the PUAB on information received from outside stakeholders. Who are they?
Well, I know that we were told that the folks from Indy provide a lot of information to the governance folks, and that's one source. And when I went to their website, they've got great information.
The Indy Energy community group. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there others?
Those were the ones that we heard. That was what we heard about.
Just Indy Energy?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Don, did you hear any others? Okay.
Can we put that in the report?
No, I did not. Oh, sure.
I mean, there's just no reason to keep that vague. I mean, it's like, well, who are they? I mean, well, let's just say who it is. We talked about the PUAB and the council coming to a mutual understanding of their roles. I think that could be part of the strategic planning and would be very helpful. I would say, you know, there's going to be a new council, you know, there's going to be new PUAB members. So how you make that stick is always, you know, a challenge. So, you know, all it takes is new council members to be elected, new PUAB members to be appointed, and, you know, you may not be able to sustain that kind of agreement or understanding. Now, if it's in a strategic plan and you tell people, congratulations, you just got elected or appointed, but here's the plan, you know, then that might help that, but that would be extraordinarily helpful. And I agree with Councilman Steinmeier. The charter is not complicated to understand. You know, it says in black and white what it is, but it continues to be interpreted very differently depending on your standpoint. In regards to the accounting and financing staff, that really stood out to me because I know from our audit of the city, our financial audit of the city and our CAFR that we just went through, that was something that was brought forward as well to me during my interview with the auditor, that we are just not adequately staffed in finance and accounting. It's not that we don't have the right talent, it's just that we just don't have enough people or hours in the day. I think that's very important. My concern is that going to be supported by the PUAB and the public who are, and frankly, you know, in some regards, the council, who, Indy Energy, who, you know, keep kind of the battle cry of you're overstaffed and everybody's paid too much. So, you know, that's going to be something that is going to take some thought. As we have eliminated positions, we have, you know, negotiated union contracts that are not sort of on par with what they have been in the past. That might be a significant challenge. So we need to really understand what value that would bring to the organization and most importantly to the ratepayers.
Mayor,
yes.
I would just say, you know, the city has lost $2.5 million because it didn't have appropriate backup for its transmission.
Correct. And that was shocking news, you know, and not good news. So I think that's
direct value for the accounting folks.
A good point, but that's something that the community is going to have to understand, and the decision makers. A lot of woven throughout is division, distrust, lack of communication. If you could maybe help me understand, are those comments more internal or external? Is that division, distrust within the organization, or is that division, distrust from the ratepayer to the city, and the communication, is that internal or is that external?
We didn't talk to anybody out in the community, so okay. The distrust is I would say between IPL staffers and council actions, PUAB actions.
Distrust between the staff and the council, or distrust between the PUAB and the council?
Well, both were communicated to us as being,
do you know?
Widespread. Communication between the council and mistrust between the PUAB and the council, but also between individual employees within IPL and council decisions, PUAB. So if you define internal, external,
okay,
and it came up, you know, more than once.
It's all in the family, right? I mean, it's not, okay, got it. That's all I need to know. Okay. Equitable compensation. This has been a topic for as long as I've lived in Independence, and I'm sure as long as, you know, anybody has, is, you know, IPL gets everything, the general fund people get nothing. They, you know, that's the piggy bank. That's, you know, where you go get paid. That's been going on forever. My cuff is nodding his head. I thought the most interesting part of that section was saying there seems to be a, migration out to IPL. Anytime somebody has a chance to hire on there, that's where they go because they know they're going to get paid more or they're going to be treated better. And there's not a lot coming back. I mean, nobody leaves IPL and comes, or very few people leave IPL and come to a different department because of compensation. I'm going to say they've got great representation. They have a very strong union that has been very strong for decades, and good for them, okay? I mean, great for them. They've negotiated great contracts. So I thought that was very interesting because I've never thought of it that way before. It's like, how do we become more of a, organization that doesn't have that sort of separation? But the way to do it is to raise compensation in the general fund, not to lower it for the utilities. I mean, I'm just, I know that's a bold statement to say in a meeting that anybody can be listening to, but I really think that would be is the only way that we're going to create that exchange of talent and experience from general fund to enterprise funds. Is the equity has to be on the general fund side. So that was very interesting though, and something that I had not really ever thought about. We already talked about capital improvement projects. We've been talking about that on this committee for 2 years, is getting a handle on that. So I liked that made it into the report. AMI, I was, rather startled by the statement that I think, let me read it. It says, the city may soon revisit AMI decision. I certainly don't think that that's, imminent at all. I mean, right now we've loaned that money to ourselves. I mean, we haven't spent any, but I'm curious as to where that came from, that we're going to take that up again.
That came from our understanding through the interview process that you had you made the decision this council made a decision not to proceed with AMI, and we would revisit it within a year or after a year. So that's where that came from. If that is no longer correct, we'll delete that.
Well, I just don't want to, that was a very contentious issue. So I just don't want to sound the alarm bell that, we're going to, that's back on the table. I mean, maybe it will be, but the money that was set aside for it is now available. So at this point, so, I think that's something for the council strategic planning. If we end up doing utility strategic planning, something we need to talk about, but I certainly don't want to send a message that, that's gonna sneak onto some council agenda any time now. So I was a little concerned about that. A lot about reliability. I mean, that's been our calling card for 2 decades is, we invested in reliability. It shot our rate higher because it had been neglected so long. And I was a little concerned about some of the information about that. Is people are very satisfied with their reliability, as we see, but can we really verify we're as reliable as we say we are? Because we run around all the time saying, enough, all kinds of numbers about how reliable we are. So there was a lot of good stuff in your report, and I really appreciate the frankness and the, just honesty about it. Is we got to do a better job reporting things, recording things, knowing, being able to back up what we say. So I appreciate that. And I think that concludes my long list of comments and questions.
Mayor, could I add one thing there?
Yeah, Go ahead, Adam.
I'm sorry. So I wanted to piggyback real quick on what you said there. You know, in some cases, whenever a city or any organization engages a management consultant, there is some level of back and forth with staff once that report is issued preliminarily. And we made a conscious effort here really not to modify that. We did just some slight fact checking kind of things, and data stuff, but there was no real massaging of the messaging here. We really wanted this to be a kind of an unbiased assessment that we did not have a heavy hand in drafting. You hit that point. I just wanted to bring that point home just a little bit. Okay, because I do know that may be a concern among people listening in or anybody. So I want to make that point.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, if we'd written it, it would have been a lot nicer. So Councilman, do you have any other thoughts that occurred to you during the course of this discussion that you want to share or questions?
I had a couple other things that I got about on the, and I was in there on having a manager over project manager. We had one out there for years and we couldn't keep one busy. And I actually put him on more than just engineering. I just didn't know. I didn't know we had that many projects going on that we would need a project manager per se out there at IPL. One other thing that caught my eye that I forgot about is the garage thing down at the garage. The city garages has been an issue for about the last 3 years, trying to make one central garage rather than everybody having their own little garage out there. The only problem with that one is that is the union contract. You'll never be able to pull off where you can say we're going to have cheaper mechanics work on our little cars and trucks versus the hydraulic mechanics, highly paid over the other ones because they are considered specialized mechanics. But I did see that in there. I wanted to say something about that. But, one other thing, my last thing is on the Ferc stuff. Jim was part of that team there. Through the years that I was at Power and Light, we was always known as the #1 Ferc Southwest Power Pool. People wanted to hire our team to come teach them. It didn't sound like that when I was reading that report. Jim, do you have anything on that?
Well, Councilman, that's the NERC reliability team versus the Ferc accounting. NERC reliability is a completely separate issue. Our Ferc accounting, Lori Brock was instrumental in handling all of that before she retired. Now we have Kendra and Natalia have been hired in the planning department. They've gone to some training on Ferc, but it's a steep learning curve to be able to handle all the accounting data correctly. That's the Ferc issue. So we still have a top-notch NERC team, and we, in fact, have one spot we're trying to fill on that one now.
Yeah, because I can recall that you guys, actually, the smaller utilities wanted to hire you. The city is an outside source. That's what I was wondering when I was reading through that report. It sounded like we might have went a little bit south there. I want to make sure that I'm in there because I know $1 million a day is pretty expensive.
No, the NERC is a separate issue.
I just want to, something I was wondering, when you were interviewing council members, Mike, were you interviewed during the process?
I talked to Heather for a few minutes one morning. I was in the middle of my sinus surgery and was out of commission, so I don't know about anything other than.
No, I think you should have taken one for the city and really made yourself available during that time. So we could have used you. I mean, you are a go-to guy. So you really put us in a bad way here. So now we know who to blame. Thank you.
Okay. yeah, a little good-natured ribbing among the council members. So we're all good here. All right. This is really helpful. Adam, why don't you tell us next steps? I don't know that we really have any feedback in terms of, changing anything or anything seems inaccurate or wrong. I mean, there's a couple little things that I don't think really even require a revision. So what is the next step in this process?
So on Monday, this will be presented to the full council on Monday, and Don and Heather will be back to have this discussion with the same presentation then. I think from there, what we would ask for is to start implementing those next steps. And following Monday's meeting, we would come back at the following city council meeting with a change order, there's existing agreement to expand the scope of services to start executing some of these recommendations, get moving on this stuff.
So Adam, when you prepare the agenda item for the council and you provide the cover sheet for whatever it's going to be, a resolution or whatever it's going to be, maybe just incorporate some of the comments from this committee that you thought might be helpful to the council. And, then we would have an opportunity to review that when we get our council packet. But I just think, bringing some context, I don't think this committee needs to take a vote. We don't have anything to recommend necessarily. To say, to give a recommendation to the council unless the councilmen feel otherwise. But I would say some of the finer points that we've touched upon, maybe we could just provide that in your cover sheet on the agenda item.
The agenda item for Monday is published, but if
but it's just the study session. I mean, when this comes forward to if it does come forward for a council vote, I think maybe providing that. And are you, Don and Heather, are you going to be presenting that on Monday?
Yes, we will, Mayor.
Okay, and then maybe that's an opportunity just to incorporate some of the feedback that you got from this committee as well.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, anything else? Okay, well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. We are adjourned.
Bye-bye. Thank y'all. Bye-bye.